focusing on native bees, perhaps bringing in a little bit of information on some non-bee native pollinators that we have as well, and discussing too the relationships between native bees and non-bee pollinators. And also bringing just a different regional perspective as well, coming from the Northeast, which will be exciting.
From the Oregon State University Extension Service, this is PolliNation, a podcast that tells the stories of researchers, land managers, and people like you who are making bold strides to improve the health of pollinators. I'm your host, Dr. Adoni Melathopoulos, Associate Professor of Pollinator Health in the Department of Horticulture. In 2018, I hit record for the first time as PolliNation came out, the first syndicated podcast from OSU Extension. And I remember that first episode. It was in a hotel room in Bandon, Oregon. It was after a full day of doing extension events, and I was podcasting the great Dr. Francis Ratnieks from the University of Sussex. The audio quality was terrible. But back then the goal was simple. I wanted to get to know you all. I wanted to discipline myself to sit down with beekeepers, growers, regulators, taxonomists, all the people who define the world of pollination. I did it to learn, and having you all listen along was gravy. But as we approached the 300th episode, I'll be honest, I toyed with ending the show. I found myself looking for more time to write and think. I looked to my podcast hero, Melvyn Bragg, from the In Our Time podcast, who recently stepped away after decades behind the mic, and I wondered if it was my time for my own curtain call. But a shift happened. Bringing Harry Vanderpool on for our commercial beekeeping segments didn't just add a new voice, it reinvigorated my own energy. It made me realize that this platform shouldn't just be about me and my interests, it should be a chair for the best minds in the field to come together and learn. So today, for our 300th episode, I'm revealing a bold new plan. We are breaking out of our borders to bring together a powerhouse team of extension professionals who are going to be hosts of this show moving forward from Washington State University and the University of Massachusetts Amherst Extension. We're finally creating a show with a scope that matches our name. So in this show, we're going to hear from each of the new hosts. And in that, I hope you'll be able to get a sense of this truly new Polli-Nation-wide era of the podcast. It's an end of an era, folks. So PolliNation continues, but it's going to continue in a different way. Today's guests are going to be your hosts moving forward as our program starts to encompass more parts of the country. I want to introduce, many of you know Harry Vanderpool. Harry and I have been doing the commercial beekeeping section of the podcast, but also I want to introduce Nicole Bell from University of Massachusetts, and from Washington State University, Brandon Hopkins, and Priya Chakrabarti. Welcome to PolliNation, your show. I'm sure many of our listeners know some of you, but maybe not all of you. So let's begin, starting with Nicole. Just tell us a little bit about your program, what you do.
Yeah, I'm the extension educator with University of Massachusetts Amherst Extension as the pollinator specialist. So most of my program is focused on wild bee and wasp education and outreach. I don't currently do much with honeybees, but it's possible I'll add more in the future. And so I do outreach in the form of online education, in-person lectures, and site visits.
And Nicole, you've got, I know, a really impressive suite of programs. Tell us a little bit more in depth, kind of what you offer folks in Massachusetts around pollinator health.
Yeah, last year we launched our online pollinator steward certification program, which is a fully online course with over 30 pollinator focused lectures. We have a few assignments that students go through, and then at the end, they get their pollinator steward certification. And we had over 500 students register for that program last year. And
Wow.
we just started our spring cohort with about 125 students. So it's a really great way to connect with people. It's the biggest part of my program right now. but I'm also doing some bee identification programming this year, along with my normal suite of talks and bee photos and things like that.
Nicole, maybe just also tell us a little bit about what was the impetus for creating your program. Your program is relatively new and it doesn't succeed another program. It's a brand new program. Where did it come from?
The program was created when I was hired in May 2024 and I moved to Massachusetts. It was originally a grant-funded position. So they procured a grant based on the need for pollinator-related education. And I was kind of lucky in the sense that it was relatively open-ended and I could create my program from scratch. And with that, I looked around at what was already in Massachusetts. There's quite a few active pollinator-focused nonprofits, and there was a big need for educational hub and a place where people could go to get resources or more formalized education. And that was really what I wanted to start with, and also amplifying all of the work that those nonprofits are already doing, and having our website be a connective resource also for people county by county to see what's out there and what's going on. So it's still an ongoing process. It hasn't quite been 2 years since I've been here, so I feel like I learn more every day about new towns in Massachusetts as well as what people are interested in learning about. And that's really what I use as my guide for my programs.
Thanks, Nicole. I want to move on to Brandon. Brandon and Priya, you're both at Washington State University. Brandon, tell us a little bit about your program.
Yeah, so my name's Brandon Hopkins. I'm an associate research professor here at Washington State University in the Department of Entomology. Yeah, my research program kind of started with research on sort of reproductive techniques, cryopreservation of honeybee semen, instrumental insemination, and that kind of stuff, and progressed more and more into commercial management practices. So a lot of varroa control work and research on indoor storage of honeybee colonies, and really just a major focus on commercial management practices for beekeepers.
It strikes me that a number of shifts that have happened over the last couple years have, come through your lab. One is indoor storage, as an example. And in addition, I would say your program probably has the largest working apiaries that I know of in a research program.
Well, yeah, I mean, thanks. I don't know that I would take credit for all that. I often think one of the reasons I like this field of work and have gone in this direction working with commercial beekeepers is that most of the ideas that come through this lab really come from the industry. So, the working with indoor storage, was nothing new, and Canadian beekeepers have been doing it since, 1900 or something. But, it was really the folks that were early adopters here in the US that said, hey, there's something to this, and we're seeing some success that kind of drove us to pursue that as a sort of a research area. And I think that could be said for a lot of the things that we do in this lab is, some guy mentions it in the hallway at a bee meeting, and I just steal those ideas and pursue that as an avenue of research. And I mean, the size of our operation, there are a few other, bee labs that run a lot of colonies like we do too. When I was a student here at WSU, we had, 60 colonies or something like that. And I think by the time I kind of got my program going, we run somewhere around 300 to 400 colonies, depending on the different research we're doing. And sometimes I think that's a good idea and it works really well. And sometimes I kick myself and wish I had, 50 colonies instead. But it does provide a big advantage in being able to do experiments at scale or more realistic for commercial beekeepers.
Well, thanks, Brandon. And Priya, you're newer at WSU, but many people in the Pacific Northwest know you because you were postdoc here at Oregon State University and also, after that at Mississippi State. Tell us a little bit about your program and how it's shaping up. There's a lot of things moving. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of what you're doing.
And I lost my camera. Sometimes it's actually hard to keep track of where my head is, but that's very true. It's great to be back in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm like this the other half of the WSUB program now, and I work very closely with Brandon and others here in the Pacific Northwest, including you, Anthony. So for my lab specifically, for our program on my end, we are very interested in understanding the different stressors that impact bees, but most importantly, how these stressors are interacting. So we do a lot of work with poor nutrition, pesticides, the changing environment, as well as diseases, pests, and pathogens. We also do a lot of work both at the hobbyist level as well as at the commercial level. So on one hand, we are trying to come up with practices that could be helping a hobby beekeeper cut some costs down, especially when it comes to maybe supplemental feeding or utilizing the landscape. On the other hand, we are also working with some other companies, like maybe testing out some miticides or a supplemental diet. So there are like two really different ends to what we do, but we do a lot of basic as well as applied research in the lab. I actually have a triple split appointment, so I'm research, teaching, and extension. A lot like my postdoc advisor Ramesh. So I basically am kind of split three ways, but I think that really gives me a great opportunity to actually be able to translate what we're doing in the lab and the field to the stakeholders, to the community, but also teach students about it.
That's fantastic. And I imagine with, thinking about those different audiences are going to come in useful as we come into the podcast. And I guess I just want to catch up with Harry. We have a podcast separately with Harry talking about, his operation. But now Harry has the experience of doing the commercial beekeeping segment and has I think maybe some things to add on. In addition, I think your situation has changed a little bit, like your actual business has changed a little bit. So Harry, tell us a little bit about updates and sort of your experience with or vision with the commercial beekeeping segment.
Really, my program began in 2013. Maybe we all can remember the big bee kill up in Wilsonville and many hundreds of bumblebees lying on a shopping parking lot area under linden trees, which gained worldwide attention, definitely across the nation here. It was a news event that has been credited or blamed for a lot of research funding, but at the same time, backyard beekeeping took off like a rocket. And there was a lot of messaging, good and bad, involved with that event. And that event, thank heavens, brought us Doni Melathopoulos to Oregon. And in that time, we have, well, let me just say, after that event, Oregon Farm Bureau president made the best statement that said, we need to tell our story. We need to get our story out, because if we don't, someone else is going to tell our story, and it may not be the story that we want told. And so that has kind of been a real motivator for the Polli-Nation podcast, is to reach out to commercial operators and to get a very in-depth insight into their day-to-day and their stresses and their hopes and dreams and what works and what does not. And it has been very, very successful. I've really enjoyed doing it, and we want to try to address the things that are current and up to date, because as everyone knows, it's ever unchanging and moving. It's never a fixed target. The problems that we have in commercial beekeeping is just ever unfolding.
And so, Harry, also tell us a little bit about what's changing with your business. Like you were, when we recorded that podcast, you were, running a large commercial business, and now you're sort of taking a different tact.
Yeah, 35 years of commercial beekeeping, and now I'm. It's really, really tough forcing yourself into a semi-retirement. I mean, I know people just can't wait for the day, but when it gets there, it's like a funeral, because I love beekeeping. And yeah, it is going to, I'm going to go back to raising my own queens, just really enjoying what I'm doing more than trying to push for the almighty dollar. So I spent a lifetime moving after the almighty dollar. I don't have to do that anymore. Let's just boil it down to that.
All right, you're gonna transition to chasing the almighty podcast. This is gonna be
That's
great.
right. That's right.
Okay, so here we are. There's five of us, the new co-hosts of PolliNation, and you listeners can hear we all have real different interests, things that we're going to bring to the episodes. Episodes that we're going to record are going to, broaden beyond my own, narrow interests in. I was thinking about like where we're all positioned. Maybe I'm the native bee honeybee crossover person, more to native bees these days, along with Nicole. So we'll be bringing those kinds of episodes, but I was really excited to hear from Brandon talking about commercial beekeeping perspectives, and also Priya just talking about some brass tacks physiology and things that can be delivered that maybe help both beekeepers who are just getting started to the kind of high science to solve some of these wicked problems that beekeeping faces. Maybe we'll do one round. I want to go around and just see, what's your vision for, the next year, and some of the episodes or ideas for episodes that you're hoping to bring to the show. So Nicole, let's start with you again.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to, like you said, certainly focusing on native bees, perhaps bringing in a little bit of information on some non-bee native pollinators that we have as well, and discussing too the relationships between native bees and non-bee pollinators. And also bringing just a different regional perspective as well, coming from the Northeast, which will be exciting. And so we'll definitely be hearing about bees in forest ecosystems, perhaps talking about cultivars and their relationships to native bees, and some other fun topics that we'll see what happens as our episodes come out.
That's great, Nicole. And I also think that, the other kind of having a real focus on extension and outreach, thinking about how to communicate these things to the public. I'm really looking forward to your episodes as we go down the line.
Yeah, me too.
Brandon, how about yourself?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to doing this and the opportunity to chat with different researchers that are bringing sort of innovative ideas into the beekeeping space, and to talk to commercial beekeepers about, like Harry said, this sort of ever-changing landscape. And I like the idea of kind of bringing those two things together. So the old school beekeepers facing this ever-changing landscape, and then some innovative research, that hopefully will come to fruition and help beekeepers manage that new model as it's always changing.
Thanks, Brandon. How about you, Priya?
I think I'm actually going to try and wear my extension hat for this first year. And I really want to make some of these findings accessible. And I want to have these paired episodes where we talk about some of the newer research and newer findings, but also what it really means, how it could be applicable, and pair it with beekeepers in the podcast. So have people who'll be hoping to kind of implement a lot of these research findings in the field, but pair it together to actually go over some of these newer things, discuss it, and keep like a paired discussion happening.
Oh, that's great, Priya. I think that's awesome. Sometimes the research seems so like, how do you connect it? Having researchers or even other people just sort of like how this will become relevant. That's going to be great. I'm looking forward to those episodes. I was supposed for myself. I'm looking forward to working with Harry, and we have to sort of think about some other beekeepers, both in Canada and in the US to interview. But I kind of would like to, now that you have all joined, to go like super geeky. There's all these little aspects about bee biology that I feel I take for granted, but I almost like to explore them more deeply. And the episode that I have in the hopper, it likely will come out before this, with Elizabeth Murray on Masserine wasps, is a case in point. It's like, oh, there are pollen collecting wasps, and they're, prevalent, but I never thought about them. And then, all of these things, I'm hoping to go down the rabbit hole a little bit into some of these arcane biology things that I thought I knew. Okay, this sounds great. We are ready to go. And so we'll have some episodes starting to roll out. This episode is being launched on episode 300. So 300 is the turning point of this podcast. We're going to be taking a completely different direction. I'm so excited to be co-hosting this show with all of you. And we will be rejoining you next episode with something new. All right. Thanks for joining, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. Show notes with links from each episode are available at the website pollinationpodcast.oregonstate.edu. I also love hearing from you, and there's a form at the website where you can pop in and say hello and give me feedback. If you want to support the show, remember to leave a rating on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever podcast mothership you use. And finally, if you have the means and you want to help support my lab's effort to document bee biodiversity in Oregon, visit OregonBeeAtlas.org and follow down to the donate button where you can make a tax-deductible donation to the Jerry and Judith Paul Native Pollinator Endowment. Every little bit helps. See you next episode.